Well, welcome to part 3 of my little mini-series on the artists who inspire me. Thank you so much to everybody who has come along on the journey so far, and in particular those people who have taken the time to comment and remind me of some of the fabulous artists out there that I failed to acknowledge. And there's one artist I wanted to point out in particular that was brought to my attention. And that's a Melbourne-based children's book illustrator from the Golden Age period. Her name is Ida Rentoul Uthwaite. Lived in Carlton, not very far from here, and definitely a contemporary of the Arthur Rackham School of Illustration, as you can probably see from some of these images. One of the great benefits of sharing this with you is that I'm starting to find out about a whole bunch of fabulous new artists to look into and discover for myself. So part 3 of the series is all about fantasy illustrators who have inspired me, continue to inspire me, and oh boy, is this going to be a tough one to do in a short space of time. I've written and rewritten this one so many times now, and I've just realized there's no way that I can possibly do the world of fantasy artists proper justice. But I'll do my best to highlight some of the artists in particular that I feel have been a big part of my creative journey since I was a little boy. There'll be a number of apologies. And I just wanted to list off a few artists that I won't have time to discuss in any great detail, but absolutely have in some way directly or indirectly inspired me and contributed to my creative style. So no particular order. People like Larry Elmore and Gerald Brom, and Michael Whelan, Todd Lockwood, Therese Nielsen, Jean Giraud, or some of you may know him better as Mobius, Paul Bonner, Charles Vess. I have a fabulous book here, Drawing Down the Moon, The Art of Charles Vess. I hold this book very dear to my heart. It is absolutely stunning. James Gurney, who's just such a generous artist who regularly shares his process, allows us in on his fabulous art journey through YouTube as well, and best known for his fabulous work on Dinotopia. And Boris Vallejo, who's sort of high fantasy art space, amazing artist. So the first artist I'd like to discuss in some detail is Brian Froud. He's an English fantasy illustrator and concept designer too. He did some work with Jim Henson on the Dark Crystal and the Labyrinth movies. Fantastic, you can see his brushstroke over those particular movies. But he's probably most widely known for his late 70s book on fairies with Alan Lee, who's an artist I may have a bit more to say about a bit later. So I credit a large part of my love affair with fairies to Brian Froud, and there's a dark, sort of captivating whimsy to his work that really sets him apart from any other artist that paints fairy and fantasy style creatures in that way. He has this beautiful knack of combining sort of petite and sprite-like fairies with these hulking, brutish trolls and goblins, and all of his work is just so beautifully detailed and packed with figures that's like a real feast for the eyes, and you can look and look and look at his images over and over again, and it feels like you're almost finding something new every time. So as I mentioned in an early video, I had quite a lot of fairies in my folio when I got my very first proper illustrating job. So thank you, Brian Froud, for that. And now smash cut to the king of gritty and epic fantasy illustration, and that's Frank Frazetta. I don't think his work would be unknown to many of you, particularly as you look through some of these images. He has so many iconic paintings in this space, and he's definitely spawned thousands of imitators. And while there are lots of artists that were making their living out of painting covers for fantasy and science fiction books and magazines. There was no one quite like Frazetta in my mind. The way he composed his scenes, the poses of his figures, the lighting and the just fabulous dynamic action that he able to instill in his images was just breathtaking. Would you agree? And maybe it was because I was a hot-blooded teen full of hormones when I first discovered Frank Frazetta, but I contribute a lot of the drawings of scantily clad barbarians wielding impossibly large weapons in the margins and the back covers of my textbooks back in high school to Frazetta and his contemporaries. I just couldn't do a video about fantasy artists without talking about him. And for the remainder of this little chat, it's going to be about Tolkien Illustrators. What a surprise. I don't think anybody that knows me would be surprised that I'd have to talk about some of the fabulous artists that have worked in the space of Middle-earth. It was Year 9 English. The Hobbit was on the English book list. That was my first introduction to Tolkien's work, and I've had an enduring love affair with Middle-earth ever since. And I could do a mini-series within a mini-series just talking about Tolkien illustrators and artists, but as I did at the start of this video, I have to list off some apologies for Tolkien illustrators I can't talk about in depth because I really want to focus on two, and you might be able to guess which two. But with apologies to Tim and Greg Hildebrand, did some amazing work, particularly back in the 70s on the covers of Tolkien calendars. Ted Naismith, David Wenzel, who did just a stunning graphic novel version of The Hobbit. It's beautiful and so much work in it. I highly recommend that if you haven't got a copy of that already. Inge Ilfeld, you might know some of her beautiful work. There's an image here that I'll show of Saruman being confronted by the hobbits back in the Shire. And I always think of that image when I think of that, when I'm reading that scene. Donato Giancola, who's a more recent artist in this space and sort of brings us almost high art, Caravaggio style to the Tolkien interpretations. He's got such beautiful, powerful work. And I just wanted to also mention Roger Garland, not the least for the fact that he was the cover artist for my first ever copies of the Lord of the Rings that I purchased back in the 1980s. And you know, there's a lot of sticky tape on the bind here, but they're still going nice and strong. So thank you, Roger Garland. So did you guess which two Tolkien artists I was going to focus on? Yes, you're absolutely right. The two go hand in hand for me, but they're really interesting in that they provide two different ends of the dynamic spectrum of interpretation of Tolkien's work, and that's John Howe and Alan Lee. John Howe is a Canadian illustrator and obviously a concept designer as well, with his amazing work contributing to the Lord of the Rings movies, Peter Jackson's interpretations in film of those amazing books. I think what a fabulous job it must have been for him to go to New Zealand and do all of those amazing drawings and illustrations to set up the style and the aesthetic of the Tolkien movies, along with Alan Lee. His way of interpreting Tolkien's world is full of energy for me. He seems to have chosen lots of scenes that sort of pop out of the painting, and a lot of dark and brooding type of illustrations. And I just love the way he paints. I love the sense of light that he's also able to bring in. So for all of the dynamic scenes that he's chosen, I particularly just love his treatment of Gandalf and the numerous illustrations he's done of Gandalf, including this one particular iconic painting of Gandalf marching with purpose through the Shire, and that lovely background with the sun sort of shining through the last of the autumn rain as it's falling. Just breathtaking. Some of his paintings were even direct influences on the movies, so much so there's one of Gandalf fighting the Balrog is absolutely the inspiration for the opening scene of The Two Towers. His body of work in Middle-earth is just amazing. I love his style, always will, and as you know from an earlier video, he was a big part of my branching out into art communities beyond my local community on the John Howe forums. So I love the work of John Howe. And then of course, there's the other side of the coin. There's Alan Lee, and the two, Alan Lee and John Howe, seem to work so beautifully well together and complemented each other so well on the concept design for the movies. But Alan has a very different style, in my opinion, to John Howe, but no less captivating and enchanting. And where John Howe would choose a lot more adrenaline-filled scenes to depict, I always think of Alan Lee as choosing more serene, almost melancholy scenes. He's another master of watercolor illustration, but he also does such beautiful pencil work as well. And I have somewhere here this Lord of the Rings sketchbook. It's just stunning, like a combination of some of the illustrations that are in the illustrated version of the Lord of the Rings. And also some of his pencil sketches. So I'm in awe of his skills, but also the ability to transport me immediately into the world of Middle-earth. Very special skill that he has, along with John Howe. So that's probably all I can fit in to this video without it becoming an essay. And that brings us to the end of part 3 of this 5-part series, and I look forward to bringing you the next installment, which will be film and television inspirations. Thank you so much again to everybody who has passed on kind words and comments and shared their stories and their inspirations with me. I've really enjoyed reading them, and I look forward to reading some more. A simple pleasure this week, I'm actually taking this one from my father, who shared that one of his simple pleasures is to walk out into his garden and just take in what has changed, what's been growing since the last time he was there. And I think that's a simple pleasure a lot of people can relate to. And if you have a simple pleasure you'd like me to shout out and share, please make sure you send me a message. I'd love to hear it. Thank you for joining me on another part of the journey, and I look forward to catching up with you again sometime soon. Okay, bye. I don't know how this is going to go.